course, I'm a person. Nice to meet you. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit about friendship bread and my variation on it, which is like a little bit of like a funky little coffee cake. In the description there's going to be links for this formula as well as how to make your own sourdough starter at home. The purpose of starter in this recipe is to give flavor, not rise. We're going to be using baking powder to give this formula most of its rise. It's really tasty. You have that funky lactic and acetic acids coming into play in regards to the flavor, as well as giving it a beautiful little texture. You can use starter that is anywhere from 10 to 24 hours of fermentation for this. And yeah, it's the funkier the better in this case. That way you're going to have a funky. For this formula, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a stand mixer or a handheld mixer of any kind. But we're going to use this for the crumble that we're going to put on top of the friendship bread. 3 glass bowls. I have 2 here. And then I have 1 with my Movie Magic starter. It's not movie magic if I call it movie magic. And then you're going to need a whisk and a spatula, as well as a probe thermometer if you have one. This is going to help you be able to temp our little coffee cake and be able to tell if it's fully done or not. For this formula I use a loaf pan, but you can use literally anything that's kind of close to this size, or a quarter sheet pan works really well for this single size batch. But if you want to double it, it'll fit into a half sheet or like a home cookie sheet. I really love the tasty, crunchy numminess. Like the more crunchy, sweet, sugary, tasty stuff there is on the top, the more I love it. We're going to need 3 components to make this final product. We're going to need our friendship bread starter, need our cinnamon friendship bread dough, which includes that friendship starter. And then we're going to top it with a coffee cake crumble to give it some tasty numminess on the top. So what you're going to do first is you're going to make the friendship starter. This is going to be at least a 3 to 4 hour fermentation period. So you have your friendship starter, 55 grams of starter, 50 grams of hot water. Mix it with a whisk in order to fully break it up, unlike what I'm doing here. 35 grams of AP flour, 35 grams of sugar, and 40 grams of milk. You can do it this way, it's just going to take longer. Mix it with a whisk. Love yourself. Yes. So your starter has been fermenting for 3 to 4 hours. It has a nice little bubbly surface. If you take like a close look at it, you can see these tiny little micro bubbles popping. You're going to take this and you're going to add it to your bowl. The total weight of this should equal about 215 grams. To this friendship starter, you're going to add our liquid because we're going to add the dry to the wet in what we call the blending method. So by putting it in the big bowl first, you're able to not have to do this like weird back and forth thing. Eggs, milk, and oil. We're gonna do 2 eggs to this. Make sure you're gonna throw your egg carton around the countertop because you're an animal and you don't know how to exist. You're gonna crack your eggs into your mixture. Compost your eggshells because you're a good person. 150 grams of oil. You're gonna add 95 grams of milk. You're gonna take your whisk and you're going to blend all these up. Yay! Next, we're going to scale out 160 grams of sugar, 220 grams of flour. We're going to need 5 grams of cinnamon. We're going to add 6 grams of baking powder, 7 grams of your starch. A reminder, this could be any type of starch you want it to be. 7 grams of milk powder. You have all your dries in your bowl, and so you're going to give them a nice mix. You have your liquid ingredients that are all combined. You have your dry ingredients that are all combined. You're going to combine them both now. Yay! I add the flour in about 3 parts. Mix, mix, mix. mix, 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 mix. You mix in the third addition of dry ingredients. So your bowl is empty. You can put it to the side. Mix, 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 mix. So you're gonna have a generally lump-free batter. It's gonna be really nice. You're gonna put your batter to the side to let all those dries really hydrate while you make your crumb topping. This, we're gonna need a stand mixer or a hand mixer, whatever, as long as you're using the paddle attachment or the attachment that you're gonna use to cream butter and sugar together typically. First thing you're gonna need is cold butter. You wanna make sure your butter is cold for this because when it's nice and chilled, it's going to incorporate into our dry ingredients in this crumb nice and evenly, and it's going to kind of break apart and slowly incorporate instead of, if it's at room temperature, it's just going to be really mushy and blend with everything instead of creating that crumbly texture. You're going to chunk up your butter. You're going to need 60 grams of butter for your crumb, 70 grams of brown sugar, 80 grams of AP flour, 5 grams of cinnamon, and 2 grams of salt. Now that you have everything scaled into your KitchenAid bowl, you're gonna kind of swirl them around if you feel like it, but really you don't have to. You can just put it into your mixer, click that bad boy in, attach your paddle attachment, and turn your mixer on to low speed. So at this stage, the butter is just starting to flake and to kind of spread into long, flat flakes. We're going to want to bring this a little bit further. So now you've stopped your mixer and you're looking at it and it looks a little bit sandy. That just means that your butter has incorporated really well into your dry mixture. So you're going to keep going though until you start to see little clumps form in your crumb. You're going to want it to reach this point where you can scrape down the sides, where if you squeeze it, do you ever play with like magic sand or moon sand or whatever it's called? When you squeeze it, you want it to come together so that it's like but still be able to form this like compressed little moon sand hunk. But yeah, this is exactly where you want it. You get something on your shirt and you're wearing a black shirt and it's like light color and people are like, Tide to Go Stick. This is the answer to Tide to Go Stick. Okay, so you're gonna take your loaf pan, whatever loaf pan you have going on. Then if you have pan spray, go ahead and spray this container. I don't have pan spray, so I'm gonna butter this guy up. You're gonna pour this into your greased loaf pan. Once you have this in here, then you're gonna take your sandy, crumbly bits and you're gonna kind of squish them to make that moon sand type situation. And you're just gonna kind of sprinkle it and break up that big chunk that you just compressed with your hand. So then we have our raw loaf. We're gonna put it in the oven for 40 minutes at 350 degrees. And at that point, we'll give it a rotate. So the timer for that 40 minutes has gone off and you're going to do a quick rotate in the oven. This bad boy is just starting to set around the sides. Get a little wiggle action in the middle. After that rotation, you're going to do another 30 minutes. Our timer for 25 minutes is up and that should be about it for that loaf. With this dough and, well, with most breads, you can temp them, and internally, when they're completely done, they should read 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Take a look-see. I don't think this is done. So, in cases like this, when the last loaf that I baked, it took 25 minutes, this loaf is taking a little bit longer. The internal temp of that loaf is 133 degrees, so I'm going to rotate it and do 10 more minutes. That additional 10-minute timer went off. I temped the loaf, it's at 160. Our 7-minute timer went off. It's at 180 degrees. I'm gonna go 5 more minutes. I just checked and the temperature is reading 190. Yay! We did it! This is our final product. Yay! It's still in the loaf pan, but essentially that's the bad boy. Yeah, that's it. Maybe I'll see you next week.